What's up, gamer? My name's Wilucco, and I was curious about something the other day. Path of Exile has this encounter called the Feared, where you go around to 5 of the biggest bosses in the game, fight them individually, and then have all of them meet up in a different arena and fight you all together. There's a pretty good reward for the first time you complete the encounter each league, so usually I just do it once and forget about it till the next league. This time, though, I was wondering whether or not it would be worthwhile to farm the Feared as a money-making strategy. To find out, I made the kind of questionable decision to run it back-to-back 50 times in a row. It was a bit expensive to buy all of the things I needed to run each boss that many times, but the execution was simple, and my build had plenty enough damage to make each boss pretty trivial. The most difficult part, in all honesty, was trying to stay awake while waiting for the bosses to finish talking so I could hit them. For one full run, we had to complete one Chayula Breachstone, one Cortex map, one Elder fight, one Atziri fight, and one Shaper fight. Then we could go fight all of them together in the Feared Invitation. Each run took about 20 minutes on average, and between the fight, the loading screens, the loot management, and rolling invitations, the whole 50 runs took a bit over 16 hours of game time. The results, though, were actually quite a bit better than I expected. First, let's talk about what happened with each individual boss before we get into what happened with the actual Feared encounter itself. Our biggest pile of money came from the Elder. Each run cost us about 75 chaos and fragments, and we ran them 50 times, so all told we spent about 27.2 divines. By the way, according to PoE Ninja on September 24th, 2024, the day I did all this math, one divine was valued at 138 chaos, so that's the value we'll be using for a divine orb in this whole video. After 50 runs, our drops looked like this. If we were to list every single fragment and unique we got with the Watcher's Eyes unidentified and every single thing sold, we would end up with 48.4 divine orbs. That's unrealistically optimistic though, because it's difficult to sell every little thing that drops from every boss, and I wouldn't want to spend time doing that anyways. So we're not likely to get that much, but even if we're being really pessimistic and only sell the fragments and the unidentified Watcher's Eyes, we still end up with 45.7 divines. You could possibly make more money by identifying the Watcher's Eyes and hoping for lucky rolls, but that's kind of risky. So for simplicity's sake, we're just considering the price they sell for when they're not identified. Depending on how much of the stuff actually sells, our 50 Elder runs gave us anywhere from 18.5 divines to 21.2 divines worth of profit, for a total return on our investment between 68% and 78%. Our most profitable boss by far was the Shaper. Each individual run cost about 12 chaos and fragments, so our total investment for 50 runs was about 4.3 divines. Those 50 runs gave us all of these drops, which, optimistically, turns into 27.6 divines. I was a little disappointed that we only got one Dying Sun from all 50 runs, but that's just the way RNG goes sometimes. Pessimistically, we still end up with 25.8 divines instead. That gives us anywhere from 21.5 divines to 23.3 in profit, meaning a 500% to a 542% return on our 4.3 div investment. The Cortex was pretty good to us as well. Thankfully, it's just a map instead of a set of fragments, so buying it was quick and easy at 35 chaos per map, or 12.7 divines for all 50. From those 50 runs, this is what our drops looked like. I really didn't want to price check all of the implicits on every single unique that dropped, so I just used the price that was on PoE Ninja for the synthesized uniques. That said, our optimistic estimate with all of these drops comes out to 35.8 divines, while our pessimistic estimate from just the Bottled Faiths and the Chisels came out to 30.5 divines. Depending on how much we actually sell, that would give us anywhere from 17.8 to 23.1 divines in profit for a 140 to a 182% return on our investment. Now for the not so good bosses. Atziri was the lesser of the two evils. Each run of the Alluring Abyss cost about 25 chaos, giving us a total cost of 8.8 divines for all 50 runs. These were our drops, and optimistically they do come out to 9.1 divines, which does outweigh our investment, but only slightly. Being pessimistic brings our income all the way down to 5.7 divines. That leaves us with anywhere between a loss of 3.1 divines to a measly profit of 0.5 divines, meaning a negative 35% to a positive 6% return on our investment. That said, it's not impossible to turn a real profit on Atziri because Atziri's Reflection and Atziri's Disfavor are both worth quite a bit. We just didn't happen to get lucky enough to find many of those during these 50 runs. Last and least, we have Chayula. Each Breachstone to run this doofus cost 100 chaos, giving us a full investment of 36.2 div for all 50 runs, and these were the drops. Being very optimistic that every single thing would sell gives us 10.8 divines. Really, the only things likely to sell are the Blessings and maybe the Crimson Dream Jewels for a total of 9.5 divines. That totals out to a loss between 26.7 divines and 25.4 divines, or a negative 74% to a negative 70% return on our investment. All that to say, we barely recouped a quarter of the money we spent to get into the encounter 50 times. Thankfully, there's more to the Feared than just the individual bosses. That's right, there's also the aggregate bosses. Fighting them all together in the Maven's Crucible with some additional modifiers gives us an extra chance at drops from each of the boss's drop pools, as well as some extra stuff from the Maven herself. In fact, even with low quantity rolls on the invitation, you're pretty much guaranteed to get at least 9 Crescent Splinters with a good chance at more from every single invitation you run, so at the very least, you'll end up with a bunch of invitations to fight the Maven by the end of it. We averaged 70% quantity across all 50 invitations, and too many different things dropped to reasonably show them in one of these cool little circle graphs. So here's how many items dropped from each boss's drop pool. Then later I'll show you some of the more interesting items that dropped. All of the costs for the individual boss fights were included in the earlier calculations, so the only real investment to include for the Feared itself is the chaos that we spent rolling the invitations. I went through and counted how much I spent on each run and ended up with a total of 2.6 divines worth of chaos spammed away. Even our pessimistic estimate is quite a bit higher than that, so the profits sound a bit silly, but we'll look at the numbers as a whole at the end to put everything into perspective. So if every little thing were to sell, we would end up with 148.3 divines. Being pessimistic and only selling the most interesting things that have a good chance of selling still has us gaining about 121.6 divines. That leaves us with anywhere from a profit of 119 divines to 145.7 divines, and a 4,577% to a 5,603% return on our investment into the Feared invitations. Like I said, a little extreme. Now for the total numbers to give you the full picture of how things went. We invested a total of 91.8 Divine Orbs for 50 Shapers, 50 Elders, 50 Uber Atziris, 50 Cortexes, 50 Chalupas, and 50 Feared invitations. If every last drop from every last boss were to sell, we would end up with 341.1 Divine Orbs. While if we only sold the drops that are most likely to sell, we would end up with 238.8 Divine Orbs. Depending on what does sell, we would end up with anywhere from 147 to 249.3 divines in profit, meaning anywhere from a 160% to a 272% return on our investment. After a little over 16 hours spent across all 50 runs, this comes out to grossing 14.7 to 21 divines per hour, and profiting 9 to 15.3 divines per hour. All things considered, I ended up with way more money than I thought I would. Honestly, I was expecting to go negative on the whole experiment, so getting more than double my investment back was a very pleasant surprise. The biggest problem with the idea of farming all these bosses nonstop is that there's so much time where the bosses aren't even targetable due to like voice lines or invulnerability phases going on. But having to sit around and wait for those things to end over and over and over again before I can really hit them, to me, is really boring compared to just running normal maps and blasting stuff constantly. Like I said at the beginning though, if your build has enough damage, the boss fights themselves are very easy to get through, so this is actually a very low effort way to make some pretty decent money. Incidentally, if you do want to look at my build, the POB will be in the description. But the final verdict on all of this is a resounding yes, it is worth it to run the Feared ad infinitum. There are other better strategies out there, but the Feared is simple and easy. The other final verdict is that, for me, it is also extremely boring to run the Feared ad nauseum. So it is a worthwhile investment, but not one that I'm likely to make in the future. But yeah, that's all I've got for this video. I'm also going to post a supercut of every single loot drop from all 300 boss encounters, so look for the link to that in the description if that's something you're interested in. If you liked this video, then leave a like. If you want to see more from me, then leave a sub. If you want to thank me for grinding my brains out in the name of science and this video, please say something nice in the comments because I am desperate for validation. Lastly, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another video.